All right, good evening. This is a city council budget workshop. Today is Tuesday, May 13th. It's 5 p.m. We're on the table with Councilor Bennett, Councilor Beck, Councilor Heller, Councilor Hawes, Councilor Dean, Councilor Fournier, myself, Council Chair Pelletier, and we are joined by our City Manager Deb Laurie. We have half a dozen things on the agenda tonight, starting with the governance section of the budget.
Yes. So, as we kind of dive deeper into the meat of the budget, I just want to remind folks that every time you raise a question, we're going to make a note of it, and we should start seeing those questions and answers come back to you all as part of the regular budget updates. In addition, oftentimes it's not unusual that a council or councilors want additional information on items. And we'll make note of those and bring those back to you as part of any public discussion. I also wanted to make folks aware, historically, if there are things you want to revisit, you said just put them on the list and we'll come back to them. So we're happy to do that as well. And then lastly, I did connect with the assessor today. So I actually think he thinks he's going to be really close to having kind of where that number is. And I think once you have that final number, last night you approved transitioning to a private plan for paid family medical leave. There's substantial savings related to that in the proposed budget. And we are going back and looking at, obviously our budgets are almost wholly personnel related, going back and refining those assumptions to see what may have changed. So I do believe we're going to have kind of a pretty good sense of where we are at the moment. With value, because value is always sort of the unknown, and once value stops changing dramatically, you're in a better position to be able to determine what, if any, kind of a reduction plan you might want to request, and if there's a number that you want to kind of target, so that we can pull all of that together and bring it back to you. So, sorry, housekeeping.
Great.
All right. So there's a couple of items here tonight. So the governance section of the budget includes city council, what's referred to as our records department, which was previously our city clerk, our elections, as well as the front counter where we process all registrations and property taxes, assessing and legal. We do create this summary. We have a big book too, but some people wanted a summary, so that's how we started doing that last year. So again, we're showing, we've got a slight increases in revenues, being generated in these areas. And it's about, what, $20,000 there. The expenses are up, close to 200,000. There was, those expense drivers, by the way, are mostly tied to, wages. So there's cost of living adjustments. All the employees in this section are non-union employees, so they are receiving the cost of living adjustment. We have merit increases. We have some substantial health insurance increases. Health insurance varies dramatically from year to year, depending on who's filling a particular position and what types of benefits they're selecting. We also now have an additional election next year to factor in, so that's driving some of the costs up. And then we've done some other adjustments related to non-union conditions, if you will, that are reflective of what we've done for those in our collective bargaining. Those who are represented by collective bargaining agreements. And we are seeing increased software costs, as you can imagine. So that's what most of those drivers are. There is one new program request that came in, and that was to add an additional person basically on the front end. I don't think it's any secret that you see there can be a delay in helping people on the phone, helping people in person, and processing mail. So one of the things that we are doing is looking to implement the online payment solution that is now available, now that we have upgraded our software to the Windows version, because we just updated that this year. It's a relatively minor dollar amount, and I believe that the city clerk is working on that now, and I'm gonna look at her and she's nodding her head, so there's that. Just so you're all aware as well, is right now the wait times are even a little bit more dragged out because we are going through a plate change. So the standard license plates for every vehicle in the state of Maine are transitioning from the chickadee plate to the tree, no tree, because you can pick either. So now, even if you're coming in to re-register your vehicle, which, you know, could be a relatively easy transaction, is taking a little bit longer because we're having to swap out plate numbers. So there is a little bit of a pickup there. I think, what we tried to identify when we summarized the priorities is really trying to lean into how we can better leverage technology to kind of encourage folks to be able to pay online. We've heard that from a number of folks. We told you we needed software. We got the software updated, so moving to that. We also, at times, it's an area where we can have, you know, a significant turnover. There are just some areas that turn over faster than others, and I think Lisa would like to perhaps, you know, I won't say who else is in the room that might be part of it, but we oftentimes, when we have vacancies, one of the opportunities we want to do is give staff the opportunity to pivot within the organization. So I think Lisa loses a lot of people to other departments. So ensuring that we're doing a better balance for our staff. Obviously, that was the technology and training. With newer staff, obviously, we need to just continually invest in their development. And now, you know, between motor vehicle, vital records, business licenses, et cetera, it can be a little bit of a struggle. Speaking of it being extra busy, the other thing to think about is with the federal government implementing Real ID. Everybody needs birth certificates, marriage licenses and the such, so there's been quite an uptick in the request for vital records and the front office as well. Assessing also had a significant turnover with some longtime employees leave, but he has, I think, been stealing from Lisa sometimes, so but he is also in the process of retraining newer staff. And obviously, they're spending quite a bit of time on the revaluation, outreach, FAQ, answering questions from people, and trying to keep that project moving. Legal, I believe, I'm gonna look at Dave and hopefully not, I believe you're coming back with a update to the vacant property register ordinance next week?
Yes.
Obviously, the council, you know, we got that with the council's direction, actually got some substantial increases in fees, which we do believe is helping to clear some of these buildings faster. We just did the nuisance property ordinance, first reading, and obviously, you know, we're gonna continue to transition and support all of those other council appointees, support the new city manager, and continue to address FOIA needs as we come up. So that's sort of the overview of the governance section. If there's any questions or anything else you want to kind of put on the list or.
Thank you. Questions? Yes, Councilor House.
So the new program.
Yes.
Is being requested.
Yes.
If we want to, do we just say we want that added?
You want to have a
this?
conversation? Yeah, we're happy to put that on there.
I think we should.
Okay. And would it be helpful if we came back and had sort of a whole new program discussion entirely so that after we get through everything, because it's, there's a reason that folks ask for everything. There are no requests for things that you know, don't have merit. So maybe what we'll just do is combine them all and bring everything back for new programs. Once we get it a better, kind of get through the bulk of things.
That'd be great. It would
Okay.
be nice to see the new programs all in one place.
Yeah.
It would be also nice to see the total budget impact of the
Yes.
programs. So if you
Yeah.
had a budget with and
Yeah.
without new programs and personnel, what would that look like?
And historically, what we would do is we would, as you know, Phil is, the assessing department is very early in getting us final value. We're typically 3 weeks out from having final value. So it really puts you in a much better position to make really well-informed decisions. So we can list everything and add a tax rate impact so that you can see all of those. Yeah.
Other questions on this section? Councilor Fournier.
Contractual services, that was just going up. And it's not a big dollar amount, it's 20,000, but
It's likely related to the rental of the cross insurance center. For the
Oh.
extra, or for the extra election and or software costs. Yep,
And as far as that position goes,
yes,
can we do like an analysis on the cost of the job? I'm just thinking if we're hiring somebody that's gonna help with the mail,
the front counter, if you will, yeah,
and the front counter,
yeah,
but obviously that would alleviate so that people can do the mail.
yeah,
And if they're doing the mail on a timely basis.
right. How much do you pick up in interest? Is
Yeah,
what you're gonna
you
ask
know
me.
that, yeah.
I do know what you're gonna ask me.
If we could just get
Yeah.
that analysis, I
Yeah.
think that would help either support or not support
Okay.
the position.
Counselor Leonard?
So, my main concern is, with, like. Just based on, granted that this was, information that was given to the council via executive, a discussion, which I'm not going to bring up, but I do have a lot of concerns with staff
Okay,
in the clerk's office, and I think this is, I understand it's another cost, but I would much rather have a functioning clerk's office where staff is not overworked with a lot of different types of work. Just
okay,
going into the clerk's office, seeing people in there, it's just 20, I mean, obviously 8 to 5, but it's just nonstop work for
It is.
everyone in there. And just talking with Lisa regarding the election season, it just gets even more hectic and
Mhm.
more crazy. And knowing that elections are potentially only going to get more difficult in the future, I really don't see us avoiding adding this. This
Okay.
is, I think, at minimum, a necessity, but to go off on Councilor Fournier's point, I actually would really like to see from Lisa these upcoming off-year elections. I think that's going to be a benchmarker for us to determine if those, just how much staff she needs for that election
Right.
is going to determine how much we potentially even need to expand her department in terms of like staffing for the gubernatorial elections coming up. I really don't want
Mhm.
these workers overworked to the point where, they're working like 80 hours or 100 hours a week.
Mhm.
It's that's not only not healthy for those
Yep.
workers, but it's also a detriment to the integrity of our elections. If we have city workers that are just working around the clock, barely getting any breaks, I would much rather pay a little bit more upfront if it means we avoid a lot of potential other issues, just because we're afraid of forking up money for a new position to help out with either some staff that are turning over or non-staff members who have been providing support and are not able to provide support anymore. And I'm not gonna out the individual who's been a stalwart volunteer in the clerk's department. I made a promise to Lisa, but
I know who she is.
but I mean, just losing people like that who
Right.
are not on payroll that we heavily rely on. We do also have to consider that, because that's a
Yeah.
considerable amount of work that just that one volunteer
Oh, yeah.
did. And we're gonna have to make up for that individual.
Counselor Fournier? I'm sorry,
No,
did you have a response to?
no, I can, Yeah.
As far as switching over to online payments,
yes.
how much time is that gonna save?
So what it is that it becomes an option. And it's whether or not someone avails themselves of the option. I don't view it, I'm hoping, we've had a lot of people ask for it, so I'm really hoping that people will take advantage of it. But I can tell you that, we've been offering the opportunity to register your vehicle online for a decade now or more. And I think, let me look, I think there's like, so at right now, we have 7,800 people doing their registrations online. And we have 24,000 walking into the building.
Hmm.
Some of that's a little high, so I can see Council Chair Pelletier's face. is think about that. So we have, concessionary agreements with the rental car agencies that are located at Bangor International Airport. And parts of those contracts require them to register a specific value of vehicles here. So that 24,000 does include those vehicles, but that is not the majority. We, we continue to try to push people to go online and to be willing to do it, but frankly, most of our folks want to come in and do their business. So I can't say what kind of relief may or may not come from offering an online payment solution, but at least it's another option that we can provide.
Apparently our staff is just so friendly that it's a bright spot in the day. And they want to come in and interact with our team.
So
That's
this
a good
could,
problem.
this could be a little inappropriate, but everybody's always says, and it's better than going to the DMV, so, or the B, so. And then just to add to what, I know the individual to whom Counselor Leonard is referring to. But I also want to make it clear that, yes, the city, the frontline staff, their job does change leading up to an election and they do fill in some other capacities, but Lisa also hires a significant number of workers specific to the election. So I just want to be clear that it doesn't all fall with on existing employees as it relates
Right.
to elections.
Right.
Counselor Fournier, I'm sorry, Counselor Leonard?
So, and I don't know, this is a question
Mhm.
for you to answer, or maybe Lisa might be able to elaborate on this, but, so there were a lot of overtime hours, last year, in the clerk and treasury department. There, well, it was certainly over like 500 overtime hours,
Mhm.
I think, and then it was, I think it was like 150, 175, but temporary, temp hours, in the fiscal year. So like, I'm just interested, like,
Yep.
what are the budget implications for that? And, like, at that point, just considering those overtime hours.
Right.
Is it just cheaper to just hire more permanent
Oh,
staff?
Totally part of the discussion. Part of obviously last year was a presidential. So there was a lot of additional activity and I know we had vacancies on and off throughout the year. And it tends to be the vacancies which drive the overtime, but we're happy to pull all of that so that when you come to that decision, you all will have the information you need.
Okay. I think I had, I mean, I'd also like to, if there's a way that we can provide a breakdown of that, like, just
Yeah.
to consider on that, like overtime temp cost versus like
Yeah.
the FTEs.
Yeah, no, I get what you mean.
Okay,
Yeah.
and so, I don't want to give Lisa more work, but, if possible, I think just seeing like an email or mail volume trend over the last 3 to 5 years might help
Mhm.
us see where we're going as well into the future. If that's too much, I understand. I don't want to put any more work on you guys than necessary, but
Let's see what we can find.
I think that would
Okay.
really help us out too.
Only other question I had is when we talk about losing staff and hiring new staff to replace them,
Mhm.
where we're hiring new people in and we're losing or shifting tenured
Correct.
staff. Are those new hires, do they tend to be at lower pay rates or because they're new? And they don't have 10 to 15 years of tenure, or is because of the demand in the employee market
Right.
right now, are we hiring them in at comparable rates of the people we're losing?
Yes. So there's a mixture of both. So part of what is built into this budget, as I said, is trying to correct the inequities that have occurred over time in the non-union pay scales. And those inequities tend to be greatest at those entry level positions. So I've tried to rectify that in here. Having said that, it's not like we have to hire somebody at the lowest level when they come in. We are constantly assessing the market for, to ensure there's equity in the pay that we're offering. So we have, our pay scales are 11 steps. So we have the opportunity to look at what's the market doing for similar type positions? And we also have the ability to say, oh, this person has, I'm just gonna pick one, this person worked at DMV. They have a higher understanding of what's required to do a vehicle registration and things like that. So we do take all of those things into consideration when we make offers to employees.
Thank you.
Yep.
I think we can, oh, yep,
No,
Counselor
no.
Mallon.
I'm just looking and miscellaneous jumped quite a bit. What was the reason for that?
So you're gonna get me.
It stayed pretty stable.
Yeah.
20 to 22,000. Now it's up to 38.
I will find out what's in there. That tends to be like assessments and fees. So I can pull the detail and bring that back for you.
So logically, with a 19% increase over last year, and last year was a, 3% decrease,
Yeah.
what would you be happy with for an increased figure?
So I would say, so to me, I mean, you're gonna go department by department, or you wanna do an
I'm just
overall?
looking at this particular department.
Okay. This one is a little misleading for one reason. One big reason is there's a different number of elections. So that's part of the factoring in of that shift in percentage is what I will say. It's not all of it and it's not the greatest portion of it, but I do wanna just point that out.
That's 36,000. So
Yes.
if we take the 36 out, what's?
Like I said, it's not the major part of it, but I just wanted to,
It's still over 10%, right?
yes.
And you had a reduction last year.
And that reduction was likely related to one less election last year.
Right.
No, yes, but forget it. Just bring me the information,
I will.
please.
Yep.
Okay, I think we can move on to public health and community services.
All right. So. Just as a reminder, and public health, especially in the book, you can see that we do provide an organization chart for you. So public health is sort of a unique operation for us because we do a lot of things in public health. But a great majority of the things we do are funded outside of the municipally adopted budget. So the municipally adopted budget is based on those activities that we do that are supported by the taxpayers. And they are primarily some administrative cost, the cost associated with general assistance, some costs associated with our public health nursing program, which are partially offset by grants, and the fact that we operate an immunization clinic. So you're gonna find in your packet that there is a list of all of the other functions that we do and the associated FTEs that are wholly grant funded. So this is always sort of one of those tricky ones for many people to kind of reconcile the two pieces. So you may notice that it's pretty frequently that you as a council are approving and appropriating grants. So we appropriate those based on the cycle of the grantor agency. Typically, it's federal funds. And under a federal funding situation, that grant period typically runs October to September, so it crosses our fiscal years. So we wanted to provide you with all of that grant funded items as well as the activity and the FTEs. So that even though it doesn't currently affect the taxpayer, you at least have it for context. And while I say it doesn't impact the taxpayer, I will say to you that I believe it actually has a positive impact to the taxpayer in some way. Because what it allows us to do is to have a little bit more public health capacity. Because we're able to assign a portion of certain full-time employees' salaries across grant-funded positions and not have to rely wholly on general fund dollars to support. I'm gonna look at the public health director. The public health director's position, most of the funding comes from the taxpayers, but a portion of it does get pulled off from these other federal and state and other entity grants. So with that in mind, the other shift that you're seeing in the public health and community services budget, and we touched on it the other night during executive, is that what you're seeing is the homeless response manager position is going to be transitioning out and falling under the public health umbrella next year. So you're going to see an increase in revenue because that's the ARPA money that we're drawing down for that position, as well as an increase in cost, but it is a net offset. We continue to see our general assistance remain relatively flat over our recent history. I know it may be hard to believe, but that's kind of where we still are. This does assume that there are no additional changes in the state budget. So we're starting to get into the areas where state and federal funding changes and shifts could impact where you wind up with your budget. So just something to keep in the back of your mind about. They really don't have any new program requests. They don't have a capital plan. They're in rented space. They want to continue to find opportunities to build cooperative and collaborative relationships in the community across all of the areas of their emphasis. They want to be continuing on through their accreditation and finishing up their strategic planning. And kind of trying to do better. I think that's what the council's been looking for, is better coordination within homelessness response in our community. And frankly, some of the resources that we've added from grants and things, I think give us an edge to be able to do that. And then obviously always with an eye towards what other funding opportunities exist. What are the community needs? How can we be really creative in how we can address the community need by looking for funding opportunities? And again, this is an area that will be highly monitored for the impacts both at the federal and state level. The public health director has shared with you that we have had one federal grant impacted. I think the impact is about $16,000, and it's money that flows through to us through the state of Maine. It's also a grant that we knew was coming to the end at the end of June, so we had begun to pivot away. We will never take an existing grant funded program and shift it to the general fund taxpayer supported budget. That is a policy decision, and any kind of priority shift like that would be a decision of the council. It does not automatically happen. Public health is one of those areas with a high number of grant funded positions. It is well understood by the workforce that if grant funds go away, the positions go away. So we really try to be creative of, this grant may be ending, but here's another opportunity to address a community need. And do we have a skill set that we could pivot to? So that's sort of my public health.
Councilor Fournier?
So the charges for services, that's the ARPA?
Yeah, and there's also some pull down. So some of it's ARPA, but there's also some indirect costs that we get to pull off grants to support.
All
Yeah,
right. No,
Yeah.
That's good.
and immunization fees.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. A couple other questions.
Sure.
I want to thank you for putting together the grant breakdown. That just helps a lot.
You can thank Jen.
And I know there's only been 16,000.
Yep.
Is there any anticipated? Is there any things that might be falling away? Do we know?
I don't know if I haven't talked to Jen about specific. We have not heard that any may be going away. Come on, you can come on down. But I don't believe we're seeing any other than as grants wrap up, what may the opportunity be in a renewal situation. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Jen.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add is our health promotion crew is keeping an eye on some of the undercurrents around the potential funds that we get from the naloxone. That's probably one area that there's been some kind of simmering at the federal level of potential area for a next set of cuts. So we have funding that we're spending and buying a whole bunch of naloxone by the end of June. And we anticipate getting the next level of funding, but that's the only one that we're kind of wondering what will happen.
But if that happened, we would just It would just go away,
Right.
unfortunately.
Correct. And
Yeah,
I think we'd have to look at other funding.
And the timing on the accreditation,
That is a process, that we don't have additional resources to be able to move through as fast as we want to. So, we are hoping, so our strategic planning is the next big thing. And then we have a lot of documentation that needs to happen. So I'm anticipating accreditation, our application probably won't go in until 2026. And that is, we are trying to leverage student interns, we're trying to leverage other resources that are out for us that we can get through technical assistance. That's one of our challenges right now, is being able to have the time and effort.
and the last question was, I'm sure, with the opioid settlement money, some might be coming to your department, I would assume.
We would like that.
Yeah,
We'd hope so.
but that's not accounted
Nope.
for anywhere in
Nope.
here. So that
No,
would
because
just
there's gonna be a separate process for that,
Okay,
and it would be inappropriate to include it as part of that general
All
fund
right.
budget.
all
Yeah.
right, good, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions from this area? Counselor Beck?
General assistance, this the total amount or that the local share?
So the total, so you see up top, there's the revenue
Okay,
of 1.177.
yep,
And the expenses are 1,539. So the local share is just under 400,000.
gotcha.
Counselor Dean?
Could you explain the change in the interfund from the past year?
Jen's gonna say no. She's like, "Ah, I don't know. But I will,
Which is in.
interfund. Oh. Yes. I will find that for you. So it is the transfer vouchers that you code for, it's likely for vehicle rentals or for, some copy supplies, but I will print it for you and bring that back.
Counselor Leonard?
So programs that, I'm not trying to say like which programs might be cut or are safe, but, just for us to be mindful of, if some programs that are heavily funded by grants, some are going to be more, costly on our community than others.
Mhm.
Is there a program in particular that you have in mind that we really should be wary of in that's heavily funded by grants that would be devastating to the community if that program were to go away?
Ooh, that's a heavy, I hope my staff isn't watching. I would say that if I look at our programs, and who we serve and at what life point, right, that it's served, I'd say our WIC program that we've had for 50 years here at the city that served some of our most vulnerable families with direct service, with breastfeeding support, with, testing for certain vitamins. I think that if that program was to go, the community would be at a significant loss. And we have satellite sites for that for WIC as well.
And just to follow up, how much of that is funded by non-city monies?
It is 100% federally funded.
Okay, thank you.
My question is somewhat, but not completely related, which is, I know we now have a grant writer.
Yep,
I would love, do we
Yes.
have like a total amount that the grant writer has secured? this
I
year?
will put that on the list for you.
Awesome,
Yeah.
thank you. Any other questions from this section? All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Next up, Community Connector.
Could we make it funny and say, let's keep rolling?
Yeah.
So Community Connector, hopefully folks understand what the Community Connector is. Obviously, the Community Connector is the means by which we provide public transportation. Not only, but we do it in conjunction with our community partners. So it is in our budget as we are the operator in essence, owner of the service. But the service is provided in Hamden, Brewer, Bangor, Veazey, Orono, and Old Town. We also do some augmented service referred to as the Black Bear Orono Express, while, when UMaine is in session. This is a fixed route, public transit system. And as a fixed route public transit system, we also have to offer ADA paratransit for those who are unable to use the fixed route system. I think, hopefully folks know that we've been going through quite a bit of shifting in the organization, as it relates to the oversight and administration of the community connector. This is an operation who had historically run on a shoestring. We had 2 employees that kind of knew it all and did it all, and we've really tried to augment that administrative support so that we can provide a better product, for our riders and our employees. So this year, we've done a little bit of a shift. We have a transit administrator piece and a transit operations administrator. When we became a direct federal recipient of FTA funds, the amount of compliance and work that we needed to do exploded, on top of an increasing demand for services and inability to find drivers related to CDL crisis across the state. So we've done quite a bit to beef that up. We now, because we have our transit technology in place, we've got our bus stops, fixed bus stops in place. We now have to have a tech. We are up to 4 dispatchers. So we've invested quite a bit in the base because it becomes difficult. We know that the community wants more from the community connector, but if we don't have a solid base to build from, we're not really going to position ourselves well for success. So having said all of that, I did touch on some of the highlights, obviously, with the fixed route, the fixed stops. We've got the trans technology and the transit technology. I don't know why I'm struggling with that. Recently, you may recall, we got some discretionary money to help train some additional drivers. I think we've got 4 more coming to the end in our driver training. I'm looking at, and I'm seeing nods, so I got the number right. And we've been very successful in obtaining grant funds. So obviously, let's see, what do we got here? We're looking to continue to do our technology improvements. We've got to increase our ridership. We'll be continuing to evaluate the fixed stop implementation. Until you get the sticks in the ground and do it, you're not going to know if that's the right place or not. So we need to be willing to pivot as we need to. We're going to have a cold bus barn rehabilitation. So we'll talk about that when we get to the Capitol. We're trying to shore up and broaden our administrative structure because there is more than enough work, and we need to make sure that we are not wearing people out. Obviously, staffing levels has been a challenge, at least for several years now. We've talked, I think, about the challenges related to transit drivers for some time, and the need for CDL drivers across the city, and how the impact of marijuana and recreational marijuana affects that as it relates to federal regulations. So we are onboarding new drivers as we speak. Obviously, our goal is to bring back Saturday service, but we also do not want to be in this Saturday service is back, Saturday services can't stay, Saturday service is back. So we're really trying to stabilize that base before we get to that point. We are going to continue to look at our fare structure. And as you know, for some time, we've been trying to work with the union to try to see how we start pivoting and providing more flexibility in employment status between full-time and part-time. Our system is built around part-time. We've had people come here and say they like it. We've had people come say and they don't. So how we work through that over the next few months will be really critical. So having said all of that, this is, when you look at this is the total revenue and the total cost to operate the entire system. Please remember that the city of Bangor is only 1 member. So the difference between the $4.7 million in revenue and the $6.4 million in expenses, or 1.4 million, that is Bangor share of operating the public transit. We fund 61.52% of the total operation. And I believe that's based on hours of operation, not miles. So what we do is there's a whole calculation we go through on an annual basis to determine how many revenue hours by community. And that's how we all as partners agree to split up the costs. Obviously, the increasing costs here are mostly personnel related. We also, as we pivot to more technology, you're gonna see increased software contract costs. We were very fortunate, and here's where I'm gonna wave a yellow flag. The state actually increased their funding to public transit, fixed route public transit. And so we've brought that revenue in. I think we're all seeing what's playing out in Augusta. I'm not sure at what point that will be sustained or not. We received our allocation? Has it been posted to the registrar yet, what our federal funding is? Okay. So we are seeing more and more delays. It's still around 2.2. Okay. So think about this from a public transit perspective. The vast majority of our money comes from the federal budget. The federal budget period starts October 1st. But because of the continuing resolutions, we are not sure of what our allocation is going to be, our final allocation, until they pass. I think they did it in March, where they finally passed a budget that got us through the rest of the federal fiscal year. So in many cases, you are operating a public transit system on, okay, this quarter I'm gonna get this much, this quarter I'm gonna get this much, and you have no idea. So you can be now 8 to 9, well, no, 2, 3. So you can be now 6 to 7 months into operating something that you do not know what your final funding is going to be. So just food for thought as you look ahead. They also have 2 new programs. One being an operations officer, again, continuing to expand from the administrative, from the base to really try to ensure that we're providing the best service that we can. And this is our estimate of how we could start pivoting to full-time driver status in some form or fashion. So those are the 2 new program requests. The capital items that are included in the budget, because I like to use this one, it's what I know. We're going to continue to fund, put some money aside to an annual reserve. We are going to continue to need to purchase ADA vans and replace existing ADA vans. What you see on here is that ADA vans and things like that, we typically can get, we typically have grant money to do that. So oftentimes when we're talking about a capital item or a purchase of a vehicle, lots of times we're looking to leverage federal funds. Federal funds will typically pay for 80% of the cost of an investment like that. And then there's a local share of 20%, which we split amongst all of the communities. We are also continuing to put money aside for what's referred to as the cold bus barn. So, the cold bus barn is an old term. And for those of you that may remember too, we used to operate an open recycling facility across from Public Works. So it was always referred to as the barn, and it's not heated, so it's cold. And so it's become the cold bus barn. We also use it somewhat for some of our storage in Public Works. So we have a project that will take back the current cold area from Public Works, convert it into somewhat heated space, replace the roof on the building, because the roof is leaking. It will upgrade the HVAC. It will address the floor drain issues, because when it was a recycling center, what you do with a recycling center is you pour concrete in floor drains because you do not want things leaching. So we need to reopen the floor drains. It will also be an addition on it to create some workforce development space, which was part of the grant that we received from the feds. And then finally, it's going to be able to assist some with the replacement of our vehicle wash. So we currently have a vehicle wash that is attached to the building. It is a static wash. You just kind of pull in and you hose it all down and you pull out. It is not big enough to accommodate all of our vehicles. It is not a drive-through. But because, we have urban impaired streams and the such, is we have to have an oil water separator. We have to grab debris. So it will have all of those items built in. The total overall cost of that project is about $9.7 million. About 7.8% of it is coming from a federal grant that we received. The state of Maine has agreed to kick in to split the local share with us, the $2 million local share with us, just for rough numbers. So Maine DOT is going to kick in about $1 million, and the city has been putting aside money. This will be the third year that we've been putting aside money. So this is building our local share. It becomes very difficult for us to come. We've known this has been a project that's going to need to happen for some time. So planning ahead, we've started putting those monies aside. So that's the cold bus barn. The transit technology is the continued expansion of the technology that we're using in our buses. And then the transit buses, ADA vans, hybrid electric. What we've done is we've put that in there. MDOT, the state has indicated that they're going to apply to the federal government, and we actually can piggyback on that to start replacing some of that. It is unknown at this time if that grant would be successful or not, but we do include it and hope that we will be successful in some of those grants. So overall, the total cost that's included in here is just over $2.6 million. $500,000 is in the operating budget. And again, remember, that is not all City of Bangor. That is split amongst all of the communities who are partners. We estimate we're going to get about $1.3 million in grants. And then we have other reserves and potential revenue sources that we would expect to get the balance from.
Thank you. Questions on this section? Counselor Beck?
So on the full-time driver status,
Yeah.
That one where it's being recommended to fund, or that's the one that's not recommended to fund at this time?
So the city manager's proposed budget never includes new programs.
Gotcha.
New programs is a policy decision, and that policy decision should fall to the council.
Okay, cause, like my question, so looking at the other piece of the capital, the annual replacement reserve fund.
Yeah.
The last proposal books, it said to talk about a local match, and instead of
Right.
coming out of the operating budget, take it out of reserves.
Right.
And then, this year it's in the actual operating budget. And, I guess just looking at it, cause we know how, I hear from a lot of people about how important it is to whatever we can do to restore service or
Right.
expand service, and I kind of get excited when I'm like, okay, we have an opportunity to go offer some full time here. I guess what are the implications of saying, okay, let's take, like we've done in the past, again, use for our local match, use reserves, and then shift that burden, because the local share of that full time was what, a little over 100,000,
That's the Bangor share,
but the Bangor share, right?
Correct.
Right.
and
Yeah.
that 125 is the whole thing.
The 125 was that's for the annual replacement reserve funding, right? So I'm just thinking, like, kind of doing a little bit of a shell game for that.
it gets this way.
Yep, just something to look at, to offset that, to get it and kind of.
So what I'd like to do is I'm gonna pull together, so we actually have a capital plan and we have a proposed funding for our reserves. So we are, for the last 2 or 3 years, we have not put money into reserves because we have used it as the local match for a number of our grants.
Yeah.
So we're now just getting to the point where we're starting to try to put some in again.
Yeah.
So I will get you, I believe we've got the projection of the reserve. There is not a whole lot of reserve money for the community connector. And so down the road, you may not have the capacity to make the grant, but I'll pull that for you so you can have that as part of the
Sure.
discussion.
Counselor Mallett, did you have a question?
Well, yeah, I'm just curious, which is probably bad sometimes. On the ADA van, how does the percentages work out for the areas that contribute to it?
So Bangor is 61.52% of the total.
No, that's not what I meant. I meant ridership in the ADA, are we providing it? Is it representative that we're using 61% of it? Or are the outlying towns using it to more than we are? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so I don't have the ridership ADA, but I can get that for you.
Cause it looks like an expensive program to run, and if we're not the major user of it, then I'd like to see a shift in who's paying for what.
you can't do that. So,
You do it.
well, I think, because I'm gonna say that the ADA is tied to operating a fixed route, so it is a requirement. And we would have to go back to our partners and talk about how you change the cost sharing provision of the entire service.
Well, may
Yeah.
need to be changed at some point in time.
Is
It's
the-
just a question.
Yeah.
And I think we'll get the ridership and hopefully that will show us better.
Council Fournier?
I was gonna ask for the ridership, not just AD.
Okay, you want it all?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's
Yeah,
very.
we have that.
And
Yeah,
what we're very excited about is in like another year. It's not gonna have to be as manual as it once was.
right.
So that's very exciting.
So we were talking about the annual replacement reserve.
Yes,
Is that for the cold barn you're talking about? No.
it's talking for
It's just for
everything,
Everything.
everything, whether it's
So.
building infrastructure or rolling, what's referred to as rolling
Rolling
stock,
stock.
correct?
But you're saying annual replacement reserve. Should
That's
it
the
just be
annual funding of it,
The annual funding,
correct?
okay.
Yeah.
And are the other towns contributing to
Yes.
that?
So that 125,
Yeah,
the city of Bangor is only contributing the 61.52% of it.
okay,
Okay,
It's
so
actually
same per-
60% for this upcoming fiscal year.
And then, yeah,
Good.
because we did the update on the percentages. Yep.
thank you.
No questions for community connectors? All right, moving on to stormwater. Oh, I'm sorry.
Actually, just one last question,
Yeah.
just to clear, just make sure I understand, so, just piggyback on what we just said, so. Just the way it reads in the budget is, it says 125,000, but we're gonna see a small revenue number for the missing 39 or something percent that everyone else pays for. So what I thought I just heard was, of that 125,000
Right.
for the annual replacement, we're only on the hook for the 61%.
Correct.
So I guess if I'm following the numbers on here, I would see the 125 total as an expense, but we're getting reimbursed by the other communities for the 39.
So that 125, I think, rolls into. Now, I'm gonna have to go pull the numbers. I'm gonna go pull the numbers on
Okay.
that one.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
All right, let's talk stormwater.
62. So, stormwater, so, back when, so the city is home to 7 urban impaired streams. I can see the city engineer counting, so yay us. And those have been determined urban impaired streams by, mainly EP, EPA. So part of that is a requirement by us to invest in projects and in technologies and infrastructure that will improve the runoff that happens throughout the city. So when this first came into play and we knew we were gonna have to ramp up significantly, we spent, I think, 3 or 4 years talking about how we were gonna pay for it. Because it didn't feel appropriate to pass it on to the taxpayers. So we ended up creating a stormwater utility fund. And what that does is it assesses every property owner, whether you're for profit or not, a fee based on the amount of so-called impervious surface you have, i.e. not just plain old ground. So this continues to generate just about $1.6 million a year. And a lot of the operating costs associated with this really are project-based. So yes, we have some capital items, but we do a lot of monitoring work. We do pay for some folks out of here. We have a stormwater technician, we pay for half of an engineering position, and we pay for a portion of a billing person, because we are always looking at what's happening in the system, how much outflow is there, what's the impact on the health of our streams and bodies of water, and what kinds of things can we do to help improve that? So you'll see a lot of, culverts is one of those that typically comes up to make sure that you're directing water in the way you want to. You'll see rain gardens or best management practices and infrastructures to process stormwater so that we can continue to protect the environment. So there are a lot of individual projects in here. It is done, we've broken it out by impaired watershed in your book. So that you can see where all, it's not impaired, 1, 2, 3. I don't think that's all impaired. So you can see that we are trying to focus our monies across. And we work obviously in concert, it's in concert with wastewater treatment and with engineering. Anytime that we're doing a project for sewer, we're looking at, is there a stormwater project that we can tack on and vice versa? Historically, we had pretty good results in doing a lot of projects with federal grant monies, which referred to as Section 319 funds through the EPA. But now, if certain things are required by your permit, they're not likely going to qualify for Section 319 funds. So we continue to have to be looking for additional federal opportunities, but continuing to make drainage improvements and water flow to protect and improve the health of our impaired streams.
Thank you. Question on stormwater. Councilor Cornelius.
Under challenges, that first big one, the special interest groups of the three pieces. What am I missing there? Who are the special interest groups?
Business owner.
It's
Business owners. Regarding what specifically?
You want to talk about that? What portions of the MS4 that they were concerned about? Because,
I just don't,
Yeah,
it's
no.
not coming to mind.
no, I get it.
That wasn't a dig at business owners, there's just,
No, I hope not.
it's just, we have urban impaired streams, Jeff Davis, Director of Engineering. And we have permit compliance through that.
Yeah.
And part of that is to, make our streams, cleaner.
Right.
And a part of that is our runoff. So we have large urban areas with a lot of pavement. A lot of that pavement gets salt, that salt goes into the stream. So, the state wants us to look at ways how we can reduce that salt. Some of it is getting rid of pavement and these large urban areas that are owned by privately owned business owners and property owners. Rich, our stormwater.
Stormwater runoff.
Correct.
Yeah, that's it's a lot to it, but that's pretty much it.
So they just don't want to pay the fees and it's.
Not that they don't want to pay the
Or-
fees. There's a fee, but there's also us getting onto their property to reduce that pavement. So, these fees we can take and to do certain projects and all these privately owned
Yeah,
properties, but we have to get in there. We have to be allowed to get in there to do it. So it's just a lot
so
of,
it's just a lot of manpower.
Yeah.
And
Right.
okay,
Yep.
yeah, okay, thank you. I just didn't know what that all meant.
Councilor Leonard.
Pete,
Oh, sorry.
You go.
just had another question on the, you said the increase in revenue was based on interest income.
Yes.
So what kind of balances are we holding?
I don't know, off the top of my head, but I'll find it. Mhm.
Thanks. That's it.
So regarding Council Pointier's first question, are there particular places in the city that hold the most challenge for us? Like I remember a discussion that we had where about the vast majority of us stormwater related issues are typically in downtown, and that's probably just because it's just so hard to get in there. But
well, there's different issues. Like this, what we were talking about earlier is a different component of stormwater. The downtown, we were talking about that, I think that infrastructure or something like that. But, our urban impaired streams are from, the mall area, all of that.
Airport Mall,
Airport Mall.
Theodore.
Bangor Mall, the heavily, just giant wide open parking lots.
so. No, I'm good, thank you.
Are there other questions on this section? Move on to the other category.
All right.
Feels like Jeopardy. What's?
Will you take other for 200? In your book, that tab is actually referred to as, I think it's miscellaneous in here and it's other in your book. So we have a number of smaller type funding, items, that just get lumped into sort of this miscellaneous area. So we have, the one that we're not gonna talk about tonight under this tab is the Bangor Public Library. They'll be here tomorrow night to have that separate discussion. But this accounts for the debt service associated with the capital investments that we make throughout the city. And I know you need your maturity schedule because it's on the list of questions. How was that?
Thank you.
TIFs and credit enhancement agreements. So if folks aren't familiar with what a TIF stands for, it's a tax increment financing, or CEA, which is referred to as a credit enhancement agreement. It is the mechanism by which we may return tax money either to a private developer or to a part of this to maybe or to businesses or to pay down debt associated with an investment that was made. I am very happy to be sitting here and looking at the pension debt of $3 million, and you may say, why? It's because we issued that debt 26 years ago, and this is the last year of the payment. So very happy to have that $3 million go away next year. The dues, those are the dues for the city as an organization. So the city's dues for National League of Cities, the city's dues to be a member of MMA, the dues that we pay to CSAC and BMIs to ensure that if we are playing music in a municipal facility, we're not violating the rights of artists. I've kept this 50,000 in here and we've kind of called it tourism. So many of you may recall there used to be a Greater Bangor Convention and Visitors Bureau. And that went away. And last year we were trying to kind of pivot at the last minute and we dedicated some of that money to the Bangor Region Chamber of Commerce to do some marketing. I've left it in here, but there is a new program that we'll talk about somewhere here later that you may want to consider. Because, you know, do you want to take this money, some money from the BNED budget? And I believe that you could potentially even tap some money from the airport. And the Oakview Group, who is the contract holder for the Cross Insurance Center, corporate has said they would kick in $25,000 to hire somebody who would kind of focus on that convention business, which is that longer term. You've got to start building those relationships. They're bidding for conferences 2 and 3 years out, but maybe a nice time into tourism as well. So there is a new program request out there for something like that, that pretty well to consider. And then the last piece of this is the county tax. And that increased by about $138,000 this year. So what you will notice on this is, and they shared this, I think, when we did the budget introduction, but that was a while ago and there's a lot going on. So recognizing that this was the last year of that pension obligation bonds, this proposed budget does include pulling $3 million out of your reserves to pay that in its entirety and eliminate the impact on the property taxpayers. I think many of you have spent some budgets with me, and you know, my approach has always been that if you were going to use one-time reserve monies, it cannot be for recurring expenses. And so I bring forward $3 million out of reserve because the $3 million expense will not recur next year. So that's kind of where that shift came from.
Questions do folks have? Councilor Beck.
On the 4th of July Corporation.
Oh, yeah.
When we last left
Yep.
that was, we had made a motion in the government ops,
Yep.
that they were gonna go and talk to you, and they're gonna talk to Brewer, and then we'll hear back about
Yep.
exactly what the arrangement was on that.
Yes. And I had reached out to the city of Brewer. And I have not heard back, so I will circle up with him tomorrow.
Counselor Dean?
I should probably know this, but why do we have a reduction in tips for 2026?
So it can be a couple of reasons. It could be, it's likely that we had a TIF that had reached the end of its life. So it no longer continues into the next year, but I'll find out and make sure. I think it was the volunteers of,
VOA,
I think it's the VOANNE across the street.
Yeah,
Actually, I
that
think
would
that's
be-
the one.
right,
Yeah,
about the same time. So would they come on the tax roll?
typically. I'll have to look, but it's pretty typical that when there is a development like that, where there is a TIF associated, is when the TIF goes away. It's pretty common for them to shift out of taxable to tax exempt. That's typically what you see,
Yeah.
but I will
I
ask
just
Phil
didn't
about
know.
that. Yeah,
Was that city property?
it was not, it was
It was
private
not, it was
property,
private.
correct. But that was an affordable housing TIF that we did.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Timing's pretty close.
yeah.
No other hands, sorry.
So,
Yeah, not that-
just on that tip issue, I mean, are there properties that might be coming on the tax roll?
We would have,
Well, and is that in the budget?
yeah.
Do you look at it that way?
So I just look at it. So Phil does all of that. The assessor
Yeah.
does all of that work.
Okay.
I don't
It's a
see
Phil
that.
question.
So we get the taxable value from
Yeah.
the city assessor.
Okay,
And then we get the value associated with every piece of property that's part of a TIF and a credit enhancement
so
separate.
I'm assuming it's doing. it.
Correct.
But-
I would assume.
I don't want to assume.
I know.
All right, thanks.
Okay, general revenue.
All right. So many times this is kind of, it's at the end of, before we start getting into like the airport. So people often say, what do you mean by general revenues? So, when you're going by department, it's easy to think, if you're in the city clerk, you sell a birth certificate. Well, that's revenue that they generated because they're having to do that work. If you're in the fire department, there's revenue in there because it's associated with the ambulance billing. But there are a number of revenues, this one may seem odd, that we consider general, not prescribed to a particular department, or basically they're not to offset the cost of operating that department, but to lower the impact on the overall taxpayers in the city of Bangor. So one of those primarily is excise tax. Excise tax, we've kept relatively flat. We still are at around that $7 million. At some point, if there's a significant shift, that could fluctuate wildly. So we really try to we'll relook and see if we need to revise the estimates. But, with tariffs, with potential increases, are we back to seeing a reduction in supply? Does that mean then that people begin to keep cars? There are people who like to change cars frequently, interesting, and there are people who keep cars forever. But people who maybe change cars frequently, maybe won't do it so much. I don't know what the impact is going to be on tourism in the summer. We have never had a problem, with the rental car agencies. They have frankly been out of cars all summer, but I don't know if that shifts and what we're looking at for the upcoming year. We're very fortunate. Our revenue sharing is going up substantially this year. Things to keep in mind, your revenue sharing is a pretty complicated formula and it goes across the state of Maine. So what I'm going to share with you is that it's based on your value, it's based on your population, it's based on your tax rate, it's based on all of these things. And what you're beginning to see in some of the municipalities who do revals is their revenue sharing is dropping. And so ours may be increasing because the impact of the reval hasn't come through. But if the assessor is correct and the shift isn't that dramatic in our reval, it really shouldn't make much difference. But I just want to throw that out there. that could shift somewhat wildly. Then there were certain reimbursements, that we received from the state of Maine. And these are reimbursements for the most part based on property tax exemptions. So there is the business equipment tax exemption program, the Betty program, and the homestead. Obviously, I think most people are familiar with the homestead. So what you see is that reimbursement rate dropping. So as you look at, if you look historically, because our values have continued to escalate, while we've all seen individual homeowners' tax bills have gone up, what you've also seen is a reduction in the tax rate. Because more value, you get to lower the tax rate because it's just a math. Your math is mathing, as Council Chair Pelletier likes to say to me sometimes. So your reimbursement from the state is based on your mill rate. So $25,000 homestead exemption at a lower mill rate produces less reimbursement to you as a municipality. So it's this odd conundrum where actually one of the budget changes that the state made was they actually reduced the money they put into the homestead exemption because the tax rates are going down so much. The state's actually giving municipalities back less money for the homestead exemption. And that is part of what's causing the continued shift and increase in the residential homeowner tax bill. So that's there. And then all other includes things like your interest income. It includes things like your franchise fee that you get from the cable company. So that makes up the most vast majority. What we are seeing, and I don't believe anybody can be surprised, is that we're seeing our franchise fees drop. Everybody's going to streaming. So I don't think people can be surprised by that. So that's kind of where you are with other revenue. But again, we'll relook. I know the revenue sharing, I think they made some adjustments in revenue sharing to align with the projections, but it wouldn't have been anything substantial that comes to us.
Questions on revenue? Councilor Beck?
Yeah, just a question about the interest. Was it ever decided by the body before I was elected, interest earned on the opioid settlement money? What happened with that? Is that gonna be?
No, we have not had that conversation. I can certainly add it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For future discussion.
Yeah.
Councilor Fournier?
The GE equipment, which is supposed to be somewhat substantial.
Yeah.
Is that gonna affect,
So it would affect Betty
right?
because GE had made an announcement that they were gonna invest a significant amount of capital in the infrastructure here. I think it was 20 or 22 million, if I remember correctly.
Right. But I just see
It
that.
hasn't arrived yet,
Okay,
but
Is
when
it-
it does arrive, it will be subject to Betty. So we will get a portion of that back from the state.
when does that start? A year after?
It does. So if it's in place on April 1st.
Okay,
So
so it won't happen.
it won't happen this year, but if it's in place April
Right.
1st of
Okay.
26, you will be receiving your Betty revenue in
be-
that same year.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there is no delay.
Right.
Yep.
Thanks.
On the cable franchise fees, is that decreased because so many people are cutting the cable?
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could have sworn there was some talk of some legislature at some point in the past where they looked at trying to charge like Netflix and Hulu and
Correct.
so on and so forth. I mean, that's something I would definitely be in favor of
That's
lobbying
correct.
for in the future.
That's correct. That's correct. With you.
I don't know which is going up faster.
So says a Netflix and Hulu person?
No,
Okay.
you know, cable, and
Okay,
it's all going up.
it is.
Yep.
Are there any other questions for tonight? Okay, I think we're
Thank you.
adjourned for tonight. See you tomorrow.
All right. Oh, gosh.